film is on the wane, not that I'm happy, thrilled that film is on the wane, but with film on the wane and we have electronic digital cinema cameras, it doesn't matter what we think the film might reproduce later. We have excellent high-end monitors on set. We have electronic cameras that will feed directly to that monitor, and we can actually judge the color of the light and the reproduction of that light. This is what you see is what you get at that point. You can actually see how the color is responding and what the light's doing. So now if we had a green magenta issue, for instance, and I don't particularly think we do, but one way to test is that I can go ahead and dial my green magenta offset on the Alexa. So this way is quite magenta, this way is quite green, and then this is somewhere in between. This is when it's zeroed out, and in looking at it, I think, again, I'm not saying that the Arri is wrong. I actually don't care what is right and wrong. I'm just saying that I can match these two lights. I don't have a way of doing it on the HS, but I do have a way on the Arri of just dialing going to some minus green, and that's just dialing back so it's a little bit more magenta. And in so doing, that looks a little closer to me, to matching between these two particular fixtures. So it's, as long as you have a tool that can land at where the other tool is, you have room to be able to, you can take these two fixtures and match them. Now, when I start getting into other light fixtures here that might not have that adjustment, then I might start getting in trouble because will they match or not? I don't know. You guys tell me, what would you like to see? Something else with these two or something with one of them? Hive light. This light has been zeroed out. It's at 5,600 degrees, and the green magenta has been set dead zero now. So I would say that as two lights that are quote-unquote daylight balanced, they're pretty dead on. I don't see any argument, if you will, between these two particular fixtures. So the story of these lights that you can't shoot with these odd light sources because you can't get accurate skin tones out of them, you can't get good color. Well, I'm looking at a pretty good looking color. Now, I can't predict what real daylight's going to be because real daylight is going to change on any given day. But the good thing is that, for the most part, real daylight coming in through windows or outside, coming bouncing off clouds and such, is going to be a black body source, if you will. It's going to be full color range, and in that regard, and it's not going to have weird little color spikes. So in that regard, I can adjust, I can gel these lights to match true daylight if I need to. But if I had weird color spikes going on, then I wouldn't be able to get there. What else would you like to see? Should we start bringing in some other fixtures? You want to keep looking at these compared to some of the other fixtures? Whatever you want. I'm gonna start making up stuff on my own if no one has a preference. All right, tell you what. How about we bring over the F8 light? I wanna compare the F8, which is a daylight balanced Fresnel light, to the Arri's L7C, which is a Fresnel light which is currently set to daylight balance, but it's adjustable, and so we can really just see between the two of them, where they kind of land and what kind of performance we're getting out of those two. To just put it right up on the stand, on the platform right here. And that way we'll have similar angles between our two light fixtures.
Dim this one down. It is what it is.
It is what it is. That's fine. You just fire it up, and then I'll adjust the area as needed.
Watch your eyes.
Okay, watch your eyes. Woohoo! It's really bright. Okay, so in looking at these two lights, I feel, well, you guys tell me what you feel. What do you see as a difference between them? I can see a little bit of difference, but curious what you guys are seeing and feeling.
More blue on that side.
Looks a little bluer on the F8. So the first adjustment I will do is just dial in my basic color temperature. I will dial up the Arri. There, it's at 6,000 degrees right now, and that looks a little closer, but then I'm also seeing, and I'm gonna stop down my lens again, just because I'm at brighter light levels. The other thing I'm seeing is that I feel a natural richness in the skin tone on this side, but this feels a little bit on the green side to me right now. So I think I'm going to add a little green to just get the two of them to match, and then we can see about adjusting in the camera to deal with that color shift afterwards. So I'm going to add some green.
Now the whole thing is green or set.
Right, well what I did is I'm making everything more green, and then I can see about adjusting the camera to get that back to a normal, if you will. So how do we feel? You guys tell me. I can dial it up. Tell me if you think we can land somewhere close to what make the Arri look more like the F8. I think I've gone too far. It looks a little too green to me. If I come back some, I'm over at the light, so it's hard to. I can't look at the monitor at the same time. What do you guys think? Am I getting close? Sorry? What do you see?
Still too green.
Still too green? Okay, I can dial back. This is where, the adjustment that we're making is overall green. And so if there are certain bits of a color spectrum, I can't dial just that little bit of the colors. I can't dial one little part of the green. I can only dial the overall green on here. So I've come back pretty close to center again, and it still doesn't, it's close, but it doesn't quite exactly match. But I'm pretty close. And now I can go to my camera and I can do a custom white balance, and what I can do is take away some green in this camera to try and even that out, because that's a nice control on the Alexa. So that's if I had lots of green, that's if I went really magenta, and I can go somewhere in between. And I would say right about there, just pulling out a tiny bit, right about there perhaps.
Not very warm. It's kind of cold.
Well, it's a little bit on the cool side, but I can go ahead and change that too if I needed to. So let's say I took this as a color, but I want to go and warm up the whole image. I can, again, I'm just doing that on the camera. But of course, I could always, if I wanted to warm up the image, I could put a little bit of gel on both of these lights. Because both of these lights are coming in a little cooler. They're set. I set the Alexa, the Arri L7C to 6,000, so it's a little bit on the cool side. So if I dial my camera now to 6,000 degrees, that's where it lands me. I would say that the Alexa's reading of color spectrum matches somewhat to what the Arri's L7C matches, which makes sense. They're the same company. They measure their colors in the same way. And so right now, this is 6,000 degrees Kelvin with a -2 color correction for the green magenta shift. And that's gotten that pretty close. I feel overall there's a little bit of green still in this image, but I'm afraid if I dial out more green, because it's a general color correction, that I'm going to start getting weird skin tones, and I'm bringing in magenta in other parts of my skin tone. It's subtle. I can't imagine what our live stream viewers are seeing, because it might, internet compression and stuff and their individual computer monitors might make all that disappear. But it's a little bit green right now because there are certain bits of color that are missing from the spectrum. But they're close enough that I think I could go out with that light and do lots of useful work with it. So we're back to regular 5,600 degrees on the camera. I'm going to make the Arri L7C a straight 5,600 degrees, and with 0 green magenta shift. And let's go ahead and bring up the intensity of that. That's at full intensity. Now, this light is a lot closer, so I'm just going to back it off some. Just to get the intensities about, a little bit closer to each other. Oop. And of course, I could always dim it if I needed to. But I would say that's roughly equivalent in intensity. Now, what do we think? Oh, do we feel that she's green overall? Do we feel it's green from one light versus the other? Where do we feel we're landing? Because this is where you start, like, you know, what are my eyes seeing and not seeing, and what am I being fooled by? I don't know. What does it look like to you guys? The Sola looks a little magenta, you feel?
Yeah, so that's right. But what's interesting is her hair actually is spiking green, but not so much in her face. But her hair.
So you feel that her hair is looking a little bit on the green side. Now I'm going to just adjust exposure here.
Here and right in here. Whereas you got magenta up in here, but you got a lot of green in there.
All right, so an interesting note is that in looking at the difference, this is where different bits of the color spectrum start coming into play, where you're seeing green show up in the yellow blonde of her hair, whereas in her skin tone, we're feeling magenta. And that is, or at least on this side, we're feeling more magenta. And so it becomes this battle, because you now have individual ranges of color. Within the green spectrum, there are some spikes and some deficiencies. And so one color is being affected one way, her skin tone, whereas another part, her hair, is being affected in an opposing way. Yeah, just look from that light to this light, and we can see how that, I don't know if that helps anyone to see stuff. But you can see there is definitely, and I'm not saying one's right, one's wrong, I don't know, but I can say that these two lights are definitely different.
Camera set to 6,000?
Camera is now set back to 5,600 degrees.
That's set to
And the light, no, the light is reset to 5,600 degrees too. So I went and I zeroed out everything. There is no adjustment like that on the Sola. The Sola is just daylight. You know,
supposed to be
it's supposed. It is. The Sola is supposed to be a 5,600 degree light. You know what light panels call is 5,600, and then the Arri, since they have an adjustment, is set to 5,600 with 0 on the green magenta color balance, and the Alexa is set to 5,600 with 0 on the green magenta color balance. So you can now shift the light and one light and the camera to do some compensation. But here's an example of one light that does not adjust. So we can see some color differences going on. Now, what I think is going to be interesting, how about we swing out the Arri, and instead we put the F8 on this side, and we can see how the F8 compares to the Sola 6. How do we feel that these two match as two lights?
Not even close.
I would say not even close is an accurate description. I would say that this light, that this is the F8, and well, you tell me, would this be magenta versus green, or green, or magenta here and green here?
One side of the face of her cheek is very much magenta.
So this side, you're saying? This side is very magenta compared to this side. So,
Yeah, much more green on the other side.
so again, who knows who is quote unquote correct? But we're seeing a lot more magenta as registered by this Alexa, and I'm pretty sure by the Canon C500 right next to it. We see a lot more magenta in the light coming from the Sola 6 than we do from the coming out of the Xylite F8. And what we can see here is two different manufacturers dealing with any kind of deficiencies that may happen in the color spectrums in different ways. Where if you have some phosphors that want to spike out green, okay, if I push down that green, it's going to create some magenta. Which way do they try to balance? Where are they trying to make things happen and fix it? Now, I can make a choice here. I can decide not to mix these lights, but if I had to mix these lights, I could try to start gel. Neither of these lights are color adjustable. So I could start taking these lights and adjusting with gels to try and match them. And once I landed somewhere, I could then take the camera and try to get that to give me a nice skin tone. But I'm going to be dancing around in circles a little bit, because that's what you have to do. You're going to have to take your units and make them work together. Another thing I think would be interesting to check is, and this is, if you actually want to step off for just a sec, let's take this light and this light, and we're just going to put them a little bit more front and center, and we're just going to look at the beam angles, because they both are Fresnel lights. They have similar size lenses on them. And I would say that it definitely gets much wider, but it doesn't quite get as tight on the other end. But do you know what the beam angle numbers officially are?
Yeah, it's 15 to 70.
15 to 70.
Yes.
So as written published specs, they're almost the same. As practical application, no, they're not. They look very different. And it's different ways that manufacturers measure and say, well, at what point does the drop off in brightness enough that you don't see as wide a field and things like that. You know, where do you call that drop off, that ring? It's just a different way that a manufacturer will say it. It's not no one trying to cheat anyone. It's just like, well, this is how we define things. The other thing I would say, just in general, is that the Sola 6 is not quite as bright a unit as the F8. It doesn't claim to be. It's a different kind of wattage of light. It also won't eat as much power, so fine. But you can see definitely in the intensity that if you want to just switch that back on, at its spotted in all the way, and if we just
Spot it in.
yeah, spot that in all the way for me, and then I'll just loosen these two on the stands so I can just swing one in and out. That's the full spot on the F8, and I'll swing that out of the way, and there's full spot on the Sola 6, and you see that they are definitely, you have greater intensity coming out of the F8. And also I would say is that you can certainly see the difference in color between the two lights when I just swing them back and forth. That this is, if this is more green, then this is more magenta, at least looking at this background that we have here. Again, which is right, which one's wrong is not for me to say, but they definitely don't agree with one another. Now, we can always compare these to tungsten lights. I have some tungsten Fresnels. These are daylight balanced, but we do have some tungsten light panels. So how about we switch over to that, and we can give that a comparison. Now, how do we feel about, this is a true tungsten light. This is no argument about, being a black body source and stuff. It might be a little bit warmer than 3,200 degrees. Maybe it's around 3,000 or something. You are 34. So the light panels is just letting me know that their light is officially at 3,400 degrees. So it might be a touch cooler in color compared to this light. But I don't know, as I'm looking at it, how do you feel? I feel a little bit of coolness compared to the other light, and not by much. But I'd say they're actually pretty close. Now, does it look, how does green magenta feel on it between the two?
I've always liked 3,200 better than 5,600 personally.
Well, sure, 3,200, in general, it feels, we're used to that as human beings being around tungsten light bulbs. But the question would be, how does that 3,400 degree LED powered light look on the right-hand side of her face, on this side of her face? How does that color feel compared to this side of her face? When I look at it just as a human being, looking at her as a person, I see a bit of magenta on this side. I feel this is a little pinker than this side. But when I'm looking from the feed coming, from the camera to a very accurate monitor, actually I don't feel it so much. So it's really a question not of like what do we see in our eyes. We have to, that's fine if we're just lighting someone and we're going to just look at them, but we're not. We're recording them on camera, and recorded on camera, I actually see very little difference between them. I would say it is ever so slightly pinker, more magenta, so less green on the Inca 6, but it's pretty minor. It's actually closer than some might expect.
Okay, we just need a
Yeah, let's bring in the prime. And what would you like to compare the? You want to just compare color? I can definitely feel the difference in the color now by separating the two. They're not blending over top of one another. And what I see is I just fix the exposure here so we can see better. Again, the tungsten is on this side, and it is a lot. There's more green information there. And our eyes are more sensitive to green than anything else. That's actually why luminance uses the green channel. We were, little amoebas in the muck, and everything around us was green, and we evolved from there. And we are sensitive more to green part of wavelengths than anything else in the spectrum. So when there is any deficiencies in green, we can start seeing it quickly. So the first thing I see in looking at this is that coming out of this light, that it is a bit on the magenta side. What I'm getting from this fixture onto her face has a bit of magenta on the skin tone. It's not a huge, huge difference, but there is a difference. I would think this is a fixture, and this is actually what the fixture is kind of more made for, but this is a fixture to be a fill light and to light up backgrounds and general areas. When you do a close-up of a face like this, unless I could take only these lights essentially and just really fill her in with only these light fixtures so I could then match them, otherwise I would feel that this is going to be a little bit off on her skin tone. What would happen here is that you're going to start seeing differences in where the blood vessels are under the skin. And if anyone's wearing makeup, you'll start seeing the differences there because the magentas, the pinks will start popping out. And so I can actually see a difference on her cheekbone and the shape of her cheek right there where like the shadow of my finger is. I see that more on this side than I do on the other side, not necessarily because of the angle of the lighting. I see it because of the color of the light. And that's not to pick on Lowell, it's using the light in a way that's not necessarily meant to be used, and in so doing, you see what the difference is in the color of the light and how it performs. What should we compare the IC3 to? How about, you want to do it? The Arri L7C, because those two lights are both color controllable. Again, I would say that the Arri has a bit more green in it than I see in the Xylite. I wouldn't necessarily say the Xylite feels pink or feels deficient in that way as much as I think that the Arri they chose to go a little more towards the green. So one thing we can do is go over to the Arri and just dial back some of that green and see what that does. I just dialed it back, what they call 15, minus 0.15. Whatever that might really mean. And that looks, it's still a touch greener, just a tiny bit. So let's go back to 0.20. And that's pretty close. I don't know, what do you guys think? That looks pretty good? And then what we can do is maybe take that same feed, I can go ahead to the white balance again, and I'm just gonna see what happens when I dial. This is a daylight balance, but going a little minus green, like saying, okay, it was a little magenta-y. So I can take that, compare to there, right? That's going to get a little more magenta. So let's go the other way. Let's go ahead and add a little bit of green back to the image, right? So we were at that, and that's how this is. The camera set to 0 on the plus-minus green scale, and since on the Arri light we took away some green to match the two lights together, now I'm going to add a bit of overall green back to the image on the camera by going a little plus green on the camera, and that looks pretty good. I still see a bit of difference, but part of what I feel is the difference that we're seeing between the two lights there is the shape of the light. Because this is a Fresnel, and this is an array. So we do see a difference in the shape of the light. I'm sure you can also see as I move my hand here, you can get these sort of multi-shadow kind of things, but that's because we took off the soft box on it just to get illumination. It's, again, we're not using the tool the way you probably would ever choose to use the tool. But why don't we take these two lights and go ahead and dial them to tungsten balance, 3200 degrees, and then we'll just compare what they look like at that point. So on the Arri, I'll zero out that color correction, that shift, back to 0, and then I'll just take the color balance and dial the knob right to 3200 degrees, head on over to the camera, reset the white balance to 3200.
We'll just fix it in post.
There you go.
I don't work with those people anymore.
Right. So once again, having dialed over, one of the other things I noticed is that both lights are definitely not as powerful in tungsten balance. And that just goes to what the strengths are of the different emitters within them. You had to basically pull back a lot of the blue because LEDs generally are at their strongest in blue. And so you basically I had to open up the iris to get a better exposure on the image. But I do see, once again, that the Arri has more green in it than we have on the Xylite. And again, I don't know what's better or worse, I just say it's different. So I'm going to dial back the green on the Arri. I'm going to dial it back to the same point, which is 0.20 on that green magenta shift. And look, lo and behold, it tracks pretty well. I would say it's still a touch bit greener. I'm going to go back a little bit more. Let's see, 0.25 maybe, 0.26. That's pretty close. There's slight tonality difference, but it's pretty close. What do you guys think? So you can take these lights, you can match them out in various ways. We do get differences in their colors. Let's try one last light, and we'll take the Arri out of the way, and we'll compare that to a light panel 1x1, which is a bicolor. I would say that the two lights are pretty close. I think that you have a little bit more green, again, out of the light panel 1x1. Just in general, it feels a little bit more green than what I have. If I'm going to stop it down a little so I get a little bit more color saturation.
So I can add green.
So that's another choice. The Xylite has a full color range adjustment. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of green on the Xylite, because that is another control we have. And this is where you start dancing, which one do you adjust? Which one are you going to dance around with? So a little bit more. We're just bringing green. Oh, I would say that's right about there. Now, what is that? Does it give you a readout of what your offset is?
It's a plus 1.6.
A plus 1.6. So the Arri, we were taking away green by about by minus 0.20 roughly, and now on the Xylite we just dialed it to add some green by plus 1.6. So you can see that we could have done that with the Arri before. It's really not. It's not about one being right and one being wrong as much as different manufacturers land their color at a different spot, and they deal with it a little bit differently, and then you can use the tools to make adjustments. Some tools don't have those adjustments. This light has an adjustment, but it's just color temperature of daylight or tungsten or somewhere in between. So I just dial that, but I can't adjust a green magenta shift in there at all. But fine, it's a lightweight little portable light, and like David Mullen was saying before, he intermixes it with other kind of lights all over the place, and you can get away with it, as you need to. So let's go ahead and put that in daylight, and then we'll just spin this guy over to daylight balance. We'll see where we land. Let's go ahead and put the camera back into a daylight mode. And I'm going to just dim this. Now you can see, again, this light got actually brighter in daylight than it was in tungsten because LEDs are more efficient in daylight. Now, do we have on the IC3, do we have that green offset right now, or did it just go straight daylight? It's straight daylight, and again, as we've seen, it's a little magenta, it's a little minus green. So why don't we go ahead and dial in that same 1.6 addition of green, and we'll see what that happens to do. And that looks a lot, I would actually go ahead and do a little bit more. I would go ahead and make it like 2.5. And now I feel that those colors match a lot better. So hey, look, I can now make a xylite match the color of a light panel 1 by 1. And I can do it in either part of the spectrum, whether I'm in daylight or tungsten. It's not, again, not that one light was right and one light was wrong. It's really that the two different manufacturers had different points at which they felt the color was what they called, this correct color. And then what's important is that if you have tools that you can use to match one to the other, then who cares who's right? Okay, so let's go ahead, and that's the Nyla on our subject right now, and then we have the hive. Now, mind you, the hive has to get to color. We already know that the hive is very blue when it's not up at full power. That's when it's standby mode. So you see it's slowly making its way up. But the other thing you see is that I got to stop down this lens real fast because these are much brighter fixtures. So that's where I was before, and very quickly I have to stop down the lens. We're going to be working at a much higher light level. And as they come up to color, I think we need another moment or two for the hive to be at full color. It's getting close. Now, I would say that at least yet, and maybe they're not quite both at full color, but I would say they're not quite matching yet. Now, is that at full brightness, full strength, 100%?
It is, but it's got a 20-degree lens.
I'm just looking at something flickering around. I think it's just adjusting the light there. Okay, so that's good because I just wanted to get the light levels between the lights similar. So it's just hard. It's just bare unit now, right?
Yes.
So, okay, so we're very bright, and so I'm going to stop down. This is not how you would normally light your subject. This is pretty not good lighting. I will take full responsibility for that lighting. But what I will also say is that stopping the two down, their two fixtures are about the same distance from the subject, and they're you have a stipple lens on there, you have no lens on here. They're about, so wide beam and wide beam, they're about the same strength. It's pretty even side to side. And I think that the color-wise, it's pretty close. I think they're both, this is where our brains, after looking at color, trying to analyze back and forth, do I agree? Is this right? Is this wrong? They match. I can say that they match one another. I don't know anymore if this is a little green or this is what the hell is this. It looks pretty nice, but I'm going to go ahead and dial in just to do. I'm going to go ahead and say that's at 5,600 degrees, and we'll go ahead at 0 green magenta shift, and then if I dial back on the green just a little bit, that's a whole bunch, right? So if I dial that back just a tiny bit, maybe, that's my brain fooling me after having gone back and forth so much, but that looks pretty close to me. They look pretty well matched out. So I think I have two daylight sources that really do complement one another. I certainly could be on a shoot where I had that light doing a background and this light doing a kick onto a subject, or one light is lighting a person and another light is doing an effect in the background, or key and fill, whatever it might be. These lights interact perfectly. I get no real color shift difference. I don't see anything strange with the pores on her skin or the blood vessels underneath. I don't get weird color matching. these two lights have no problem to one another. So wherever their standards are, they agree. I think we're kind of out of time. I want to thank everyone for being here today, for all of this fun LED lighting testing. I think I'm on camera there. You can see me there. Thank you all. To our live stream guests, thank you for coming as well. I want to thank everybody who's been here today. I want to thank all our manufacturers and our sponsors. And I also want to let you know that we have the next in our series of AbelCine EXPO. I love being under the light saying this. It's like really in my bad lighting setup. We are. This is a continuing. Oh, there I'm really lit. This is a continuing series from AbelCine. The AbelCine EXPO. Our next one is going to be in January, and it's going to be. I don't have the date off the top of my head. Sorry. That's going to be on-camera recorders, little portable recording devices that kind of, for recording your video signals, as opposed to like the built-in ones on whatever given camera. There's lots of different units for that. Some of them are for video, some of them are for RAW. There's a whole variety of different devices, and that will be coming up in January. And I invite you all to attend in person or online. Thank you very much.